ready to go?
Live streaming and recording.
Beautiful. Okay, the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that? Or, okay, Sue Ellen, what have you got?
Fire hall.
Fire hall, okay.
We can put it under updates if you like.
Yeah.
Talk easy. Or wherever. Well, new
It's not
business.
really a new business, but let's put it in there anyway, 10-3. As it gets addressed somewhere in there. Anybody else?
Do need to let you know that item 4.1 has been deferred. The delegation of Leonard Foster, the UBC beekeeper, unfortunately had a family emergency and was unable to attend today's meeting.
All right, thank you, Tyler. We checked that, and gives us another 10 minutes. Now, later.
And you'll note in your package, there are on-table items
Yes,
for item 3.2, A through F.
okay. Note that. Okay, the approval of the agenda as amended. Maureen, thank you. Allison, all in favor? Thank you. And move on to the consent agenda. How does everybody like to look at the consent agenda? Sorry? Oh, public comments. Oh, yeah, we got a whole bunch. Sorry.
First up, Richard Best.
Richard Best.
And for those who just came in, if you have public comments, you can sign this sheet.
Just a question before I read my little talking points. Isn't the Legion present their deal first?
No,
The Legion is in the consent agenda, so we haven't gotten there yet in the meeting.
So what do I do?
You can speak.
You can just speak to it.
To whatever
Okay.
subject you wish.
Okay, well, the subject that I'm speaking to is the Legion's request to make changes to the Good Neighbor Agreement. And in my notes, it is called the GNA. I presented you with a letter from 13 of the 21 residents surrounding the Legion property who do not want changes to the GNA and ask that you vote against these proposed changes now and not move forward to a public process. This represents 62% of the affected neighbors. Turn to the last page for a map to see the red highlighted residences. This was all we contacted, as 2 of the neighbors are on the Legion board. 1 neighbor is municipal planner and he probably wants to stay neutral. And the remaining 5 we did not have email addresses for, and we were given very short notice that this was even coming up. So, but it shows a strong support for leaving the GNA as it is. I also want to highlight the reasons for this and give some brief additional information. The number of complaints about the Legion event since 2012 appears low for 2 reasons. One is because neighbors such as I have tried on numerous occasions over many years to deal directly with the Legion board about honoring the GNA, only to have promises made and that are later broken. I've continually tried to educate new board members in hopes they will honor the GNA, but it has consistently been dishonored. And if the particular rules of the GNA that are dishonored are rules 13 and 18, so you can, in your spare time, look through that. The second reason is that with the various changes of ownerships of property and renters, it turned out that only about half of the residents were even aware that there was a GNA that was being violated. My second point is it makes no sense to add on additional events per year when the Legion board members have stated that they are having difficulty finding volunteers to monitor the current number of events, which is usually below 10 per year. How could they possibly handle more? And in addition to that point about the 10 per year, there's a letter from one of the long-suffering neighbors, and there are 6 of us who have been there for 25 years. Rebecca Ragland's memory of the situation is that back in the day when the Legion had its liquor license suspended for being naughty, it was the liquor licensing board that set the number at 10, and then that was carried over 10 years ago when we established the Good Neighbor Agreement. Number 3, requesting to not have a Legion representative to monitor non-Legion events is completely irresponsible, since this is when most of the infractions against the GNA take place. I can't count the number of times my wife or I have gotten out of bed and gone over to the Legion to close the doors ourselves in order to make the noise disturbance more tolerable. And I just say in addition to that, often we would phone over first, but it was too noisy for them to hear the phone. Or if they did hear the phone, we were met with a belligerence like we were the problem. Expecting renters to honor this part of the GNA is reckless on behalf of the Legion, as there is no motivation for renters to do so. Each time an organization asks for our approval to have an event, we always explain the rules of the GNA and ask that they keep doors and windows closed. But this rarely happens unless a Legion representative is there to specifically supervise this. And I would say that if the Legion were to investigate some kind of climate control, then it wouldn't get overheated in the building and they wouldn't have to open the doors and windows. But that's logical, and as we know on Bowen, logic does not often prevail. Number 4, we've been going through this cycle of negotiating with the Legion for years, only to be disappointed time and time again. This is why we asked the bylaw department to educate the Legion board members of the GNA. And I'm really grateful to Tess and Donna. They did a beautiful mini seminar. The Legion got the picture and then decided it'd be better to change the rules. We were relieved when they did and hopeful this would take care of the problem. And now the Legion wants to change this very important aspect of the GNA. This is very disappointing and not a show of good neighbor behavior. And number 5, the other rules the Legion wants to change are to do directly with noise exemption policy and can be dealt with there. For example, canvassing could be set up online or through email so that the Legion doesn't have to canvass door to door. There are many possible solutions to the problems the Legion speaks of, which could be addressed with some creative brainstorming, not a change to the GNA. And in sum, we don't want to close the Legion down. We just want them to follow the rules that allow them to have the noise bylaw exemptions to do their fundraising. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. David Bridge, please.
Good morning. I just briefly want to state the fact that as far as the Legion, and I'm not speaking for the Legion, just as an individual, basically they're asking that for the 6 times a year that the Legion actually puts on a sponsored event, that they be exempted from going around and having to request our neighbors for noise variance. Invariably, we get it, but it requires visiting 20, 21 houses 6 times, and many other times because people aren't there. So it's simply a matter of asking for exemption for those 6 events that we sponsor. We're not asking for more events or more times or more noise. And the Legion is very much aware of Mr. Best's problem, and we do our best to try and keep the noise down. We've installed double pane windows along the front of the Legion to reduce the noise. But there's no question that if there's a group there, whether it's ours or another, there's always somebody, some individual who gets up and opens the door because it's too hot or something. And if we're there, we invariably try and get it closed as quickly as possible. We are aware of the fact that noise goes out, particularly towards Mr. Best's house, and we do our best to mitigate that problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Ms. Julie Saxton, please.
Good morning. I'm a resident near the Legion, and I would just like to comment on the proposal to amend the Good Neighbour Agreement. I'm not in favour of amending this agreement. I'd like to see the agreement complied with. Should Council choose to put this forward for public consultation, I would ask that the Council consider opening up the agreement further than the proposed amendments, to consider other measures that may help residents in terms of keeping noise down. This would include measures such as using technology for noise monitoring, include training requirements for new board members such that they're aware of the provisions of the Good Neighbour Agreement, and looking at the type of events that the Legion is currently holding. Thank you.
Mr. Glenn McGregor, please.
Good morning. My biggest concern with everything is the fact that when the agreement was made up, a lot of work went into that. Both sides finally agreeing to what was written down and gone with. My concern is that, am I going to have to come here every 5 or 10 years to try and keep this agreement alive? It's really, really overstepping, I think, on the Legion's part. We put up with a lot from them over the 32 years that I've been a neighbor to them. I have supported the Legion in the past and was one of the key members in getting them to the point where they only received a small penalty for their violations, because I didn't want the Legion closed down. I do not want the Legion closed down. I like it the way it is run now, when they are on board with our agreement that they use. The one thing that they stated in their new proposal was to have bingo calling not part of the noise. I think what they were really asking for was not bingo calling, but the axe throwing in the parking lot, being allowed to have the announcers speak out their names and tell how close they were to the bullseye, of which on a Thursday afternoon, I believe it is, I get to listen to for hours on end in the parking lot as their drinks are going out underneath the tent, rain or shine. We get to listen to, and now the great crazy axe-wielding Marion Spross is going to go for the bullseye. Yes, she gets it. On several occasions, we have had guests over that look at me and go, "You guys listen to this every Thursday?" I'm like, "Yeah." I believe bingo calling was misplaced by axe throwing, is what they really want, is for their parking lot to have an announcer standing out there. Even though there's maybe 7 contestants and 20 people drinking underneath the tent, outside with no doors closed, having this announcement yelled out over a PA system. My God, of all things, I put up with years of people saying, "Goodbye, Frank, goodbye, Hillary," out in the parking lot. To continue on for 10 minutes, because as we all know, when people have had a few beverages and they're on their way out, we've all done it in the parking lot. "See you around!" Honk, honk. Now we get to listen to somebody yelling out, and this has happened, in a microphone, the names of every axe contestant, whether he hits the bullseye or not. Very annoying. I think when we go to change things, everything should be put on the table of what is really wanted by the Legion, not just bingo calling. I've never seen a bingo game, never heard it. So if they do have it, they must do it very nicely, because we don't notice it. Anyway, I hope to see that this is turned down before it even goes to a public hearing or a public process, and all the expense of what we've already covered over so many years and agreed to keeping it under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Ready, Todd?
That is it for public comments today.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they'd like to see pulled? Allison,
I'll call 3.2.
3.2, okay. And we'll just put it in section 11, are you happy with that?
3.4.
Sorry?
3.4, please.
3.4. All right, that'll go to section 11 too. You happy with that, Norm?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. And can somebody approve the items as outlined? So agenda. Yeah, Sue Ellen? All right, we'll get to those later. So delegations.
Do we have a note?
So it's carried.
Oh, yeah, all in favor. Forget that one. Just too few of us here, that's all. Delegations. Okay, so 4.2, the Bowen Island Community Foundation Revital Signs Report. Looking forward to this. Oh, thank you, Sorlin. Holly.
Good morning, Acting Mayor, Councilors. Soren Hammerberg, I appear as Chair of the Bowen Island Community Foundation. With me are two of our directors, Holly Graff and Sherry Johnson. We are delighted today to present to the municipality our report as released on Saturday to the community. Vital Conversations, powered by People 2017. Thank you for making this time available, by the way. I'm going to provide some prefatory comments about the process and background. Holly, as co-chair of the Vital Conversation Initiative, will provide an overview of the day itself when many people gathered to present their views. And Sherry Johnson, as co-author of the report, along with her husband, I should give due credit to Edward Walkman, will summarize the findings and the 8 priorities that have been distilled. We are available, hopefully if time allows, to answer any questions that council may have. So with no further ado, if I could circulate these to you. There is an executive summary which is found at page 32. I encourage members of council to read the whole report, and the distillation in the executive summary may be appropriate for you to refer to for this presentation. Just by way of all too brief background about the work of the Community Foundation, we are a charitable entity that I'm sure most of you realize raises money through donations and increasingly from legacy granting from our community. Those proceeds are invested. The income from those investments are then strategically granted back to the community in accordance with the priorities established by the Vitals Conversation process. I'm delighted to advise that since our last report, that some of you may remember we presented in 2014, the Community Foundation has granted in excess of $400,000 back to our community by way of grants, scholarships, and bursaries to our students. It's quite an exceptional number for a community our size, and proportionately 4 times what West Vancouver grants through their community foundation, repeatedly the wealthiest community in the country. We should be proud of that. We have granted those funds through 12 Bowen charities, and I should also say that the foundation itself is administered by an all-volunteer board. The Vital Conversation process is integral to all of the 200 community foundations across the country. The goal is essentially to distill the values and priorities of all the communities that we serve. As I said earlier, many of you will recall the 2014 report, which was used by other charities, ourselves, and of course even your own municipal advisory board in guiding granting within the community. The second installment lists 8 priorities. Many of these are not surprising or unexpected, and many of them essentially reaffirm the community values to help guide the granting process going forward. So how did we reach those conclusions? And to that, I'll turn it over to Holly.
Well, good morning, councillors and acting mayor. Thank you for having us here today. As Soren has mentioned, you're all aware of the 2014 Vital Conversations event, where the Community Foundation attempted to determine the needs of the community from the people who live here. Since then, numerous organizations and individuals have stepped forward to address the improvement opportunities that were identified. So at the end of 2016, the foundation once again wanted to assess the current needs of the community. So how did people get to participate? Because that's obviously a good question, because whomever is at the table gets heard. And we wanted to ensure that this wasn't just an exercise where the already vocal citizens got a chance to speak out again. It was a closed event with 61 participants, 20 facilitators and scribes, and in order to ensure that we had a good pulse on the community, we spent months refining the process and protocol that had already been established in 2014 by our predecessors, Kathy Bellringer and Joyce Ganon. So to ensure the attendees represented diverse ages, experiences, walks of life, and interests, 55% of the participants were specifically invited. The remaining 45% were randomly drawn through a community-wide lottery. So the 55% that were specifically chosen were done by first examining the 7 key areas identified in 2014. Just quickly, those areas were public dialogue, community gathering place, healthcare, civic pride, seniors and marginalized people, environment, and mobility and transportation. We then identified projects within each of these categories, things that have been undertaken and the people associated with those projects. We then compiled a list of what we called key influencers within the community who are either actively engaged in these initiatives or who were considerably plugged into one of these segments. So our committee interviewed these folks, and we asked them 4 questions. What holds us together? In other words, what do you love about Bowen? Where do opportunities lie? Where there are challenges, we asked them, where are challenges? And then how can we work together to strengthen our community for the future? This is all very enlightening, but at the end, we asked them to identify 2 people that should be at that table. And we specifically asked it for the name of at least one person whose voice was not typically heard. So we wanted to get those people who didn't typically speak out for whatever reason. So our admittedly unscientific sampling method consisted of balancing out people from each of those 2014 7 priorities. We also added priorities of business and millennials, just trying to keep it really encompassing. So then, as I mentioned, the 45% remaining seats was purely based upon community members who entered the draw, and we did exclude council members because we felt that council already had a platform to have your voice heard. We also wanted it to be anonymous and to people to feel safe that what they said there was kept in confidence and they felt safe and comfortable in speaking out. So for almost 4 hours that morning, participants were guided by an off-island expert facilitator through small group discussions centered around 4 questions. First question was, when you picture a strong community, what stands out in your mind? What does it look and feel like? Then we asked, what is Bowen doing well? We didn't want to just focus on problems. We wanted to know what were Bowen's strengths, what was Bowen doing well. The third question was, where does Bowen have opportunities for improvement within our community? After the tables identified the top 8 priorities for improving our Bowen Island community, we broke and each participant selected an opportunity they felt was a top priority and they personally wanted to discuss further. So participants then moved to that table where a deeper understanding of that particular priority was discussed. Here they are asked the 4th and final question. what are possible solutions and actions for these improvement opportunities. We didn't want just to hear what problems were, we wanted to actually have some suggestions for actions. So these discussions included possible problems, the root causes that signal the need for improvement, and potential solutions or actions that might result in improvements for our collective good. To close the Vital Conversations event, participants were then asked to write a story about a personal vision of success, their vision of what Bowen would look like and feel like if some of these issues identified were successfully addressed. So this document that we've handed out captures the highlights of what the participants, our friends and neighbors, saw as Bowen Island's opportunities for becoming an even better place to live. And then whenever possible, participants' actual words, phrases, and stories are used to portray the essence of this exercise. Now, to share the actual outcome of that day, I'd like to pass it over to Sherry Johnson, who, along with Edward, took hundreds of pages of paper and distilled it down into this report that you see here.
Thanks, Holly. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year to those that I haven't seen yet. The report before you is a very exciting document for our community. It provides our citizens, our local government, and our charitable organizations guidance in what is truly important for us today. It sets the priorities for what will continue to strengthen Bowen. You'll remember from the Bowen branding survey we did a number of years ago that when we asked the question, what makes Bowen Island unique, community came out loud and clear. One of the major themes from that survey was enveloped in community. In fact, all the research that Edward and I have been involved in with our island, with the EDC, Grafton Lakes, Bowen Island Arts Council, community has been very strong and dominant. In addition, community was in fact mentioned over 140 times in the comments on the recent Municipality Island survey. When we focus our efforts on the issues that are important to our community, we are in fact working towards delivering Bowen's brand promise. You'll be better for being here. We know that each of you will take the time to read the report, but we do want to emphasize a few things for you today. First, based on the discussions and stories from Vital Conversations, we were able to create a picture of the Bowen Island we want to be. So I'd like to just take a minute and read that vision. Bowen Island is our community, our home. It is a place of safety and belonging, a place where the young learn from the old and the old learn from the young. On Bowen, we encourage and accept everyone, where all are respected, all voices heard. Our differences make us stronger. Here, all have options for secure and affordable shelter. Our vulnerable are safe and warm. Those who work on Bowen can live on Bowen. On Bowen, everyone has convenient and timely access to on-island health care, professional resources, and services when we need them. Bowen is a place where the protection of our natural environment, our greatest asset, is carefully considered in every decision we make. We live harmoniously and in concert with Mother Nature. Bowen is in fact a role model for green living, bringing positive change into the world. Bowen is a place where the community gathers frequently with friends and neighbors, giving us the opportunity to share our stories and strengthen our bonds, surrounded by support and caring. On Bowen, we collectively take responsibility for raising the next generation with strong values and dreams. Bowen is a place where we give back, do our part, are involved, a place where we are all united in our efforts to do and be the best we can be. Bowen is our community. It is our home. This vision of Bowen encapsulates the 8 priorities from the 2017 Vital Conversations. Those 8 priorities are: develop housing for all, bring healthcare close to home, support our youth, celebrate diversity and inclusion, increase our volunteer pool, expand our transportation options, create gathering places for all, and take responsibility for the stewardship of our environment. The municipality's recent island survey has also highlighted the importance of some of these issues to the community. A few of these priorities, specifically community gathering place, healthcare services, environment, and mobility and transportation, are in fact holdovers from the 2014 Vital Conversations. So we obviously still have some work to do around those priorities. Though not singled out as its own priority, seniors was raised frequently and provides a unique opportunity for improvement issues pertaining to let me start over. Though not singled out as its own priority, seniors was raised frequently and provides a unique opportunity for improvement. Issues pertaining to seniors were mentioned in a number of the 8 priorities, in housing, healthcare, gathering places, and transportation. Participants felt that solutions in these areas must also consider issues particular to seniors. Now, as Holly mentioned, along with identifying the community priorities, the Vital Conversation participants also brainstormed solutions and actions. And you'll find a lot of them, at least 3 or 4 per each priority in the report. But here's just a few examples. Create and maintain an up-to-date and accurate database of the Bowen housing market to better understand and monitor the ongoing housing situation, including short-term rentals. Approach local organizations and government to provide funding opportunities and bursaries for professional development and training for local residents, primary providers, and responders in such areas as emergency medicine, home care workers, and mental health. Work with the West Vancouver School District to encourage required youth volunteer time to be completed on Bowen. Develop a community charter that commits all community initiatives to support and encourage diversity, and explore the criteria to become a best practices community for environmental stewardship. I think those are just some great examples of the creativity of action items that came out on that day. A critical realization that emerged from the Vital Conversations and must be kept in mind in moving forward is that these priorities cannot be tackled solely on their own, independently from one another. For better or worse, a solution in one can impact another. Opportunities and solutions should be approached strategically with an eye to both the short term and the long term, and with careful consideration of all intended and unintended consequences. Bowen Island is our community, it is our home. By tapping into our shared emotions and aspirations, and by focusing on the priorities for our community, we can be better and we will be better. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much for the foundation. It just is an amazing compilation of the community involvement there, which is a good base for us as council going forward, obviously, because it really does get into the community and the feedback is immeasurable. Vital Conversations, the last one, was good because there was a lot of filtered out effects from that came out of that one, the Caring Circle, which has been amazing, and a few others that I can think of. But so it's an invaluable tool for the municipality to use, and I just want to again thank the foundation for a tremendous amount of work in getting that together. I like how you put all the community, how you decided who was going to be there, even though you said I couldn't come. But it was nice. It was nice. I think it was a nice cross section, and I think that the results actually reflect where you went on that. So yeah, keep up the good work. That's all I can say. I don't really have any questions. Soren, I would also like to thank you as chair of the foundation for the past few years. Anyway, how many years has it?
It's 5 now.
5 years, eh? Yeah, and you're going to carry on, and we thank you for your amazing leadership in the foundation, and it's you've really done an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Anybody else? Comments, questions? Allison?
The number of people, I think Holly said, you said there was 61
61.
plus the 20 scribes, so you had over 80. Did the scribes participate in the discussion or just scribe?
To varying levels.
Yeah, depending on the person.
Anybody else?
We'd also welcome, if, once you read through it,
Yeah.
if you have any questions, if you want to dig down, if you want more stories, we've got lots more stories than we could have put in this publication. Certainly feel free to contact any of us, and we'd be glad to give you more information.
And also like your synopsis of Bowen Island, it's pretty far-reaching, but pretty significant also. It really hit the spot. Sorry, Melanie?
It's just a simple, just a request, if we could also circulate the document to all our committees.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if I could point out, you can also find this report on the foundation website, bowenfoundation.com.
Maybe you can put that down as an action.
already done.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Sorry I missed the presentation yesterday, but I'm sure I got the gist of it today. How did it go yesterday, by the way? Or no, Saturday?
It was
Saturday.
It was excellent. We had a good gathering. 60 folks showed
Oh,
up,
fabulous.
and it was a miserable day, as you know. And,
Yes.
maybe the offer of a warm cup of tea at Doc's grew more than it. I'm just kidding. It was a very well event.
Excellent. Again, thank you all very much. All right. Business arising from the minutes. Maureen. Speaker series.
So included in your agenda package is more information about the speaker series that we've been talking about informally. And I don't know if I need to say anything more by way of introduction. If there are any questions, now that you've had an opportunity to read it over. And if there are no questions, then I would put forward the recommendation.
What was the recommendation?
The recommendation is to give me work. That Councillor, I'll read the recommendation. That Councillor Nicholson and staff be requested to develop and organize a speaker series to help inform council decision-making and community awareness regarding housing options for the community, including planning tools available to municipalities, housing management best practices, housing types, for example, co-ops and partnership models, for example, the Community Lands Trust. So I will move that.
A second.
Okay.
So,
I was
Allison.
going to ask them, in reading through it and the push we're getting to get going with things, I think the community would probably accept a one event rather than dragging it on as the choice. So I didn't know whether by having the word series in the resolution rather than something maybe less programmed, so it could be one, it could be 10, might be a better word, because otherwise somebody's going to say, well, you said you could have 2 events.
right. And all of this is going to be subject to the availability of the
Yeah.
individuals that I
Yeah.
have in mind. So your suggested rewording was
What, change series to program? Or?
program?
Yeah,
I'm
just
fine
something
with
that
that. I'm fine
doesn't,
with that. You okay, Sue? Yeah. So if the recommendation is accepted, then I will get going with contacting the people that I've mentioned, and if they're not able to get some other folks to come. In particular, I'm keen to have somebody come and speak about community land trusts, because that has been mentioned a fair bit in the community,
yeah.
and I'm not certain that we all have a good grasp on what that actually might mean going forward.
Are we going to have an opportunity to decide how we're going to produce this series, or is it going to be, like Allison said, multiple, or is it going to be a one-day event? Are we going to have some input into that at a future date?
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm being asked to do here is to develop and organize. So I would keep council informed.
Yeah,
Depending on availability, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely. I think, as much as I like the idea of a one-day event, because I think there'd be better participation, but it would be quite onerous, it'd be a big day. and a lot of information, so, anyway.
When does the Cove Commons open?
February, March?
Okay.
It's
not set yet, sometime, not yet.
And I'm not sure if that would be the best venue, so that's one of the things I need to look into as well.
I noticed that in your report, thank you for that, that there were options, and you did talk about whether a one day or a bunch of evenings or
Yeah.
a morning. You know, I recall during the official community plan debate that a one morning thing, like a 3-hour session, like has just been described to us, worked pretty well and got good turnout. And that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I guess, like I said, it would be nice to, once you get some more information, to come back and sort of have a run at how this is gonna happen.
Just another idea, sorry, that didn't come to me until just now, is that with a number of speakers, that the format taken by the sustainability breakfast, where you have a number of speakers and they each have sort of 7 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, or the kind of Pachacucha kind of style, might be good because it really gets the ideas all side by side and people can, anyway, quickly leads to good discussion. That might be an idea if you can get the speakers to come for just those short presentations.
Yeah, I think that's certainly worth a conversation once Maureen gets some timetable information from the speakers and whether they're willing to come over and that sort of thing. Any more discussion? Ask a question, all in favor? Thank you. Nothing from bylaw. Staff reports. Daniel, we're quite early here. Yes, I saw, there he is, yeah. Ready to go?
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Just because on our printed version, for some reason, the page numbers didn't go there. So if you could say what number, agenda item, and what page.
Okay,
If
sorry.
anybody's got that.
Okay, here.
I've got it on my,
7.1.
this one.
Sorry. 7.1.
On this yellow one, it's just.
Yeah, and I don't have page numbers because I'm using the wrong encrypted things. So.
Okay, it's pages 97 to 107.
So thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. So here today to introduce a development variance permit for a series of properties on Russell Lane. So Russell Lane is located in the Cowan Point area, close to Seymour Bay, just immediately north of a portion of the golf course. And it's a series of properties that have recently been subdivided and are undeveloped on Russell Lane.
When you say recently been subdivided,
Yeah.
like within the last year or 15 years ago?
I'm not sure when it was finalized. I could check, but I don't know. offhand.
I think it was a number of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I was asking if
Right.
it changed something, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's in our, like it's in our
Yeah.
land use bylaw up, so it's not pretty sensitive.
Is that
but
just
it's
down
undeveloped.
from, I'm sorry, is that just down from IDLC, is that? on
Yes.
there?
Yes.
Is-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's in area 9A of the land use bylaw of CD6, that's the Cowan Point Comprehensive Development Area. And so what that zone allows, so here in area A, a 1.5 meter setback from the front and rear lot lines. However, what this developer noted when they were sort of planning their houses was that we've got this other section of our land use bylaw 3.30, no building shall be sited within 4.6 meters of a lot line that abuts a highway. So that's one that's come up recently that we've asked our legal counsel for advice on how do we deal with these two conflicting things where in a zone we can say you've got a less setback, but in our general area we say you need to be further back from the lot line. And our legal advice was essentially that no, that this 3.30 would trump a lot line that's smaller than it. So the developer had noted that we had brought that forward in other properties to council, that this was an issue, and so they wanted to be proactive and not run into an issue when they came with their building permit application. So they've applied for a variance permit for these 5 properties to reduce that 4.6 meters to the 1.5 meters to match the zone specific setback. And so referring this out, to especially Public Works, they didn't note any issues with it. Given it's a small section of road, they're not as particularly concerned with that visibility setback. So our recommendation is that notice be given that it be considered at, and it's the January 22nd meeting. But it'll be the February 26th, 2018 meeting. Okay, it's in the recommendation in the agenda, I just have it wrong in the PowerPoint. But, and that council authorized staff to give notice to properties within 100 meters. And so I have for any questions.
I read through this whole thing about 3 times, and I'm not really clear.
Okay.
Now, when they talk about highway, is a highway any kind of
Yes.
roadway?
A highway is any road or access route in the Fairland Strata Plan, so any surveyed right-of-way is a highway, what we call a highway, yeah. And so, I mean, I think sort of reading this and my interpretation of the intent of it is like in the SR2 zone, for our most common zone, we have a 7.5 meter front and a 3 meter side
Yes.
lot line.
Yeah.
And we call the front lot line is the shortest lot line that's common to the lot and highway. So you can end up with a lot where it has a short piece, if it's on a corner, right? You'll have the short part of the line will be on one road, so we'll say 7.5 from that. But actually the long part of the lot goes along another road as well, and so we would say, okay, it's not 3 meters there, you don't get to be that close, you're actually 4.6, you have to be further back. So there's a compromise between what your front is and what your side is. So in that case, it kind of makes sense for zones that where the front lot line is more than 4.6, so I'm saying you have to be 7.5 normally, but in this case, if it's your side, you can't be your side lot line distance back, you have to be further than that. Where it gets complicated is that these ones where we've said, like in this zone in area 9, you're 1.5 from all your lot lines. But we would say, well, except from a highway, you just be further back. Is currently how our land use bylaw works.
Mhm.
What we've done going forward in some zones, so like the Grafton Lake bylaw, is we've put, based on the feedback we got, that the areas that have a front lot line less than 4.6 meters will say, despite section 3.30, your front lot line is this. And I think that when we bring like a housekeeping amendment, we'll be doing that in other zones where they have a lot line that's less than this. But this applicant has noted it and doesn't want to be held up or inconvenienced, so they brought this forward in advance of their building permit.
Okay, if we go back to the map.
This one, or like their proposed.
That one there, yeah.
Yeah.
So, may I ask?
So it's just along the roadways that they're changing it?
Yeah, because right now, like their lot line is 1.5 meters from both sides,
Yeah.
but it's just that from along the road, even though their zone says 1.5, they would have to be 4.6 meters back. And what they've done, this like proposed sketch shows all these
Yeah, I
lines
see that,
essentially
yeah.
within that.
It wouldn't be very productive to be way back.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that now. Thank you, Maureen.
There are homes in this zone that have been built with the 1.5
Mhm.
already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And looking back through our files, I would say that probably different planners had different interpretations. And when we started, we weren't entirely sure and had different sort of looking through the files, you can see different planners have written different things. So we sent it to our legal counsel. So that's,
Well, I think it's very helpful that the developer has brought this forward in
Mhm.
advance, It's proactive.
Great. Allison first.
Yeah, because this zone was done as an amendment to the land use bylaw after the land use bylaw was done, so
Mhm.
probably in thinking, we just thought, well, this is later, it trumps the other
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
and it's specific to that, so specificity overrides generalities from my income tax wording. But the other thing is, you want those houses to be set back, because that's the ninth tee box in front of them.
Right.
So you don't want golf balls, errant golf balls going into somebody's front.
right. So our goal would be to have them closer to Russell Lane.
The road.
So
Yeah.
having them closer to Russell Lane
It makes a lot of sense.
is a better situation, and it's also slightly higher up too.
Yeah. Depends who's driving it.
And those houses up above are not, they're again set back, and there's a big
Quite a bit
lot,
higher,
so
yeah.
it's not an issue for them.
Melanie?
So, if I got this right,
Mhm.
this is to allow the setback 1.5 meters along Russell Lane and Cow Point Drive. So they can, but that's just the property line, would start at 1.5.
Yeah, from the property line. Yeah, not from the pavement, but the property line.
But the setback
Yeah,
from
the
the
setback
prop-
is from the
is
property.
1.5, so they can build their house 1.5 meters back behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gary?
Sorry, Go ahead, so,
It's
yeah.
okay. I'm just thinking that anything that will bring more clarity to the planning department and to all property owners and developers going forward is a good idea, so I'm in support.
Awesome. Okay, are you pretty happy with the way this is printed in here? I mean, I
So
can-
I'm
I
looking at
can
the
read.
agenda online, and yeah, the February 26th, I just, in my presentation, I put the wrong date. But yeah, I was hoping that it could be moved as written.
Yeah, I would like to move the recommendation. We have to do them separately, or we do them both at once?
You can do them both at once.
Okay, both recommendations as written. I know you'll make sure that all the proper information is in there. Have a second? Thank you.
So just to be clear, what's
What's
not
that?
right?
Oh, sorry, Alison.
This is right.
This is right. In my presentation, I put the January 22nd meeting
So
in.
that, yeah.
But
Just for a little
the wording's
clarity,
right.
that just makes you know, I'll just read out, I won't read out the legal description, but I'll read out the other two. That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DVP 10-2017 to Bowen Island Properties Limited for the variance of reducing the setback required to 1.5 meters for 889, 893, 887, 881, and 875 Russell Lane. Legal description as set out in the agenda at the February 26, 2018 meeting of council. That council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of DVP 10-2017 to Bowen Island Properties in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the above described properties and in the neighborhood.
I have a question.
Yes, so go ahead.
It's just probably nothing, but it says 10-217, so it's just the naming of the DVP that goes by when you start doing it, is that how it
Yeah,
works?
so we received the application just before Christmas, so it was our 10th application in 2017.
Good, I just want to make sure it wasn't a typo and that I understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, ask a question, all in favor? Opposed? Obviously not. Thank you. These are passed. Correspondence?
And the correspondence, yeah, I should speak.
Speak to that.
We have correspondence from Tom Matson and his partners regarding, they would like to appear before council to discuss their proposal for purchase of Area 1. As I've indicated to them, I'm very uncomfortable about this idea, and you can see the email trail there. Mr. Madsen responded that we're not prepared to make a formal offer without council support in advance. We formally request again a presentation to council first. I spoke to our lawyer about this because, as I mentioned to Tom, I was very uncomfortable with the ideas. We had a realtor with a contract in place who any offers should be made for, and I do not think it would be overly onerous for them to do it through our realtor. Our lawyer has indicated, and again, this is what I support strongly, why there isn't support for them appearing before council is, one, the contract, two, on the land sale aspect. Ultimately, it should be submitted to a real estate agent for presentation, and so council cannot accept the presentation at any meeting. The other issue is the land use issue, the rezoning, proposed rezoning. Council could hear from the applicants, but no commitment can be made or formal support given when there is a need for rezoning, which has to have a public hearing requirement. So both our solicitor and myself as CAO encourage Mr. Madsen to submit a proposal through our realtor. And at that time, council can determine whether or not we will consider it.
Any comments on that or questions? Simone?
Thank you, Kathy. I did look at the video presentation that you sent a link to, and this was 29 minutes or something like that. It was a long presentation, and I appreciated getting a look at it. It's what I gathered, and I liked the innovation that I was seeing. There were some good ideas, and I would just encourage the participants or the proponents to go through the regular process. We've seen in the past other proposals that have come forward in one way, and then changed during the process, and so I can't see how council could make a commitment before rezoning, because we depend on the public participation, and that's a legal requirement, and I think the community should have an opportunity to have their input, and we need to pay attention to that. So I just encourage the proponents to talk to our realtor.
Anybody else? My only comment would be, and because I did talk to the proponents and I did tell them to bring it to council, but what I really missed in the whole deal, and you're quite right, Sue, it's nice to have these things come to council, and then we can say, well, you know what, we really like that idea, you know, we think you should go ahead. But the difference is that we are the vendors of this property. So all of a sudden, there's a conflict of interest here. And that we just, obviously, through council, we can't accept that, so they're gonna have to go through the proper channels.
Yeah, I did encourage them to submit a video to council. I think it's great background information. And for any member of the public who would like to see it, the link is now on our website. Okay. But again, I can only encourage the proponents to.
Yeah.
So,
Allison?
we all got sent the presentation of the video. I think I got, I'm assuming everybody,
Yeah.
because Sue Ellen mentioned it was in here, but you got it directly from Tom as well, didn't you?
I believe I sent it on.
He sent it. He said, as per Kathy's request, here's the packet.
Yeah, well, it's in here, in the
Yeah.
agenda packet.
Yeah, but he'd also send it to all of us
Yeah,
individually.
that's right.
Yeah, okay. But,
Yeah, it's fine to have a look at it, as long as we don't comment.
Absolutely.
We can't
Well,
comment on it,
the
that's
other
all.
issue is with the realtor, even if we sidestep the realtor, we'd still have to pay the realtor the commission because we've got a listing agreement.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Is everybody happy with that, the explanation
Yeah.
there? Thank you. Okay, reports of committees, calendar commissions, that's a 9.1. Councilor Nicholson, for the Bowen Island Municipality Transportation Advisory.
Oh, yes. This came up in the context of our little ferry and all the issues that we've been having regarding line jumping and so on, and sort of a general sense of, well, who's responsible, a lack of clarity around who might be responsible for addressing the issue. So I had a chat with Kathy and with Bonnie Brokenshire about some of the things that we might do to actually start to address it. And this recommendation comes out of that discussion, that council requests the Transportation Advisory Committee, BIMTAC, to review the Traffic and Use of Streets Bylaw, number 133, 2005, consolidated Jan 2016, and report back to council with recommended amendments to address ferry marshalling issues, such as line jumping. So in looking at the Traffic and Use of Streets bylaw, Senior Bylaw Officer's response was they are our streets. And there are all sorts of statements in that Traffic and Use of Streets bylaw about how to manage the traffic on the streets. And the bylaw gives authority to the Superintendent of Public Works, to bylaw, and also to the RCMP to engage in managing the use of streets. So I talked with Dave Hawking, the chair of BIMTAC, about whether he would be interested in receiving this recommendation, and he said bring it on. So he's happy to take a look at this with BIMTAC and see what can be done.
Are you moving that recommendation?
I'm moving that
Okay, is there a second for that, then we'll carry on with the conversation? Thank you, Sue. Okay. Go ahead, Allison.
Would you please clarify what you mean by line jumping?
People jumping the line, the queue.
What do you mean by jumping? I mean, if the line is nodding back to the corner, and somebody's gone into the snug and bought their coffee and then left, are you saying that somebody who drives down and goes into that empty spot is line jumping?
No, I'm not saying that.
Then what do you mean by line jumping?
People who are butting in and preventing other people from getting on the ferry. So, I mean, I think that's the common term that's used. Is there something you would prefer?
Well, no, I just wanted to clarify because other people have talked about filling in the gaps at the bottom of this line jumping. I guess, I think this is just a can of worms that's been talked about for umpteen years, and I can think of another very classic example of line jumping is when you're driving onto the Lionsgate Bridge between Taylor Way and the access to the Lionsgate Bridge. There is 2 lanes and there is a solid white line, and you are not supposed to cross that solid white line. People do it on a regular basis and they butt in. And the only way to stop it is when, and the same thing happens driving down George Street, is to have the police sitting there handing out tickets to the people that butt in. Now, I think given a small community and, you know, just suggesting that somebody shame post that person's license plate number and car description on the form, or on ourselves, is probably the best way to deal with it, because there are people who are going to do that regardless, and it's a total waste of time of the RCMP to sit and enforce it. And as far as I can tell from having had comments like this for the last 18 years, that's the only way to deal with it. Short of putting in a solid barrier all the way down, which means moving the lanes over and everything. So I'm not interested in going there as a barge pole.
Okay, Melanie?
I think it's timely to have this discussion. I think even just to get clarity on where we lie on it. The only thing I'd like to suggest, though, is I think to have a really good discussion, we need also to involve Public Works, the RCMP, and bylaw as well, just so we can get their input to have a comprehensive discussion on it. I think it's, what I liked about the recommendation is that it says issues such as line jumping. We could also open it up to issues like idling in the very, just to get clarification on, do we as a community, do we want to address this and how do we address it? Are we willing to put in staff time into it or not? But I think we have to have a discussion as a community, and starting at an advisory committee is probably a good way to have a
For
discussion.
clarity, we do have an anti-idling bylaw, so you're
Yeah.
just talking about the
Just
resources
enforcing.
required.
Enforcing, you know, that's, I think that's where the discussion lies, is that do we want to put staff or any resources into enforcing those? Because it would mean that you'd have to have someone down there, so I think it's a conversation to have.
And I would just suggest the discussion of allocation of staff resources should be done at the council level, not at a committee level. But-
Okay, so, but I want to figure out where, because I think it all lies on staff capacity, like, so, so what does, do we want to have BIMTAC bring those back, or do we want to have that discussion at council then?
The recommendation says report back to council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Allison, you got something?
Well, I don't know that there's amendments that can be done. Yeah, I wanted to ask, there's a flagger down there right now
Yeah,
because it's
Jewel.
a small
Yeah.
ferry. I know we've organized it, and I think BC Ferries is helping to pay for it.
They help pay for the first week, we're.
Okay, so my question is, how much, how many hours a day was she working, and how much is it per day or per hour? It's a 4-hour shift minimum, right? So how much? is it?
2 weeks, the 2 extra weeks does have cost us $1,400.
So,
We're trying to
yeah.
recoup that from BC Ferries
Yeah, so $1,400
for 2 weeks.
for 2 weeks for 4 hours.
Yes.
A day.
Monday to Friday.
Monday to Friday, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's,
Melanie?
Apologies, I'm just not quick thinking today, but Kathy, I'd like some advice. How then does BIMTAC engage with Public Works, RCMP, and bylaw to get their input into what would be a good solution? I just can't, that's why I can't figure out.
Yeah.
Because we need their input to, if someone says it's just not staff time, it's just not worthwhile, then I think that influences so what's the suggestion?
Well, you know, I don't think it's a matter of staff deciding their allocation of time. It
But
would
just
be-
giving input on, it would be in order to
Yeah,
implement that idea, X, Y, or Z, it would require. I think that also would help.
Yeah, I would say it certainly involves bylaw services and the RCMP. I'm not sure how much it involves Public Works at this stage, but maybe it can be to invite representatives from those groups to the BIMTAC meeting to discuss.
Just as a first step, requesting BIMTAC and then maybe having that discussion at the
Then that's what,
advisory.
okay, then that's what I'll take away. Then I'll follow up then with the chair to see if we can get those stakeholders involved in the conversation. if stakeholders not the way, but anyways,
Yeah.
those agencies or whatever it is involved.
I think it's worthwhile to have the conversation and maybe have a look at, and I'm sure, like you said, Allison, that it's been done a million times before. It's obviously a concern. It's very limited in its abuse. But if there is some abuse there, I mean, you know, we've tried to educate the public on how to work our fair line and stuff like that, but some people don't want to use that information. Yeah, I think we should do some very preliminary work on it, involving probably the RCMP and a little bit of staff time, just to see if there's anything. But I think it's going to be extraordinarily hard to enforce, and that's one thing we're going to find out. And you know, what are we going to do? Put somebody down there for 10 hours a day?
Maybe we do
10,
to begin
6.
with.
Huh?
Maybe you do for a bit. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, maybe, yeah. Maybe it could be a bit of a purge.
I'm,
So,
as a member of the Transportation Advisory Committee too, I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think it's good to revisit it, especially when we know we've got lots of new members in our community who may not be as familiar with the issues and the protocols and the discussions that we've been having in the community. I also think, so I think there's an education component to all of this, and the discussion will be useful. And I also think that it's natural for a multi-purpose piece of pavement like our main road is, where we're using it for a number of different things, which I think is very efficient. And that we have to look at what better ways of managing it, or new tools that might be available. I don't know, maybe there's some software that'll help us or something, I don't know. I can't imagine what it is, but I look forward to the discussion. I think it's worthwhile to have a meeting of the advisory committee that's for sport. So I support it.
absolutely. Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Opposed? One. Opposition?
Thank you.
Thank you. New business. The Metro Vancouver Director, Councillor Nicholson, update on council.
Metro has not met
Met,
since the tail end of November, but there is in your agenda package under item 12.12 is a letter from the chair, Redmore, about the transit-oriented affordable housing study. And I'd encourage council and the public to take a look at that. It's interesting.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. And 10.2, the Islands Trust Municipal Trustees.
I've got a few things.
Okay, Allison?
The Islands Trust has hired a new chief financial officer, Julia Hobbs. I hope I've got that right. I know it's Julia. I met her last week at the Financial Planning Committee meeting, and she's a CPA and used to be with KPMG, who does the audit for the Islands Trust, and worked on the Islands Trust audit, so that will be good. She was certainly interested in learning about how the Bowen calculation worked for how much tax is requisitioned from us. The budget has been drafted, and there will be a budget consultation process that starts this weekend. And hopefully the ad will be in the undercurrent. There's going to be a survey as part of it. And so I would encourage everybody to go online and participate in the survey, to read the documents. And it's looking as if the amount to be requisitioned from Bowen Island will be $293,000. Last year it was $243,000. And the main difference seems to be items that are increasing in the tax, trust council, trust area services budget, and not using any surplus to fund operations.
Thank you. So,
Just a couple of things to add on the Islands Trust Fund, Islands Trust front. Islands Trust has also hired a new communications and communications officer. So replacing Pamela.
It's Andrew. I met him last week too.
Okay. So read some questions you had about signs down in the cove and that kind of thing. I'll be able to now forward that, get that going now that we've got a new communications person.
Do you know his last name?
I can't remember.
I want to say when.
I'll forward you the info.
Yeah, that's right. He's, Claire Frater has put him in touch with Sophie.
Great.
And he knows all about our island page and all that stuff. I raised all that last week.
Great, thank you.
And I also wanted to just point out items number 12.9 and 12.11. These are advocacy on behalf of the environment. This is Chair of the Islands Trust, Peter Luckham, wrote to the province about protected areas for coastal Douglas fir bioclimatic zone, proposing that the province also include the coastal western hemlock that we are in here on Bowen Island, which might help with the logging issue if we're asking for. So they're supporting our call for protection of our forests. And then the other one is 12.9, which is agricultural waste control. So this relates to pollution. So the Islands Trust is saying we need stronger measures for making sure that manure and other problems don't come into the watersheds and issues with our island environment. So these are some of the advocacy things that Islands Trust does on our behalf. I just wanted to flag those. We've got a meeting coming up. Different committees meet all the time, but we don't meet as a council for a little while yet.
Okay, thank you.
March.
All right. So 10.3, Sue Ellen?
Yeah, this is about the fire hall, and I just wanted to ask Councillor Morse and Councillor Ander, as mentioned, members of the fire hall committee, is when will, I've had some questions out there in an email. I'm wondering when will those questions be answered, and how will council be consulted on next steps? Because I didn't have a, I was surprised by the site prep that went ahead. I wasn't aware that that was happening, and my questions were still outstanding. So I'm just wondering, how can we be, when do questions, and I've been getting questions from the public. I'm just wondering when my questions will be answered, and will council be consulted on the next steps?
You have those questions, Ellen?
I've got the questions, and I thought we had answered them, I'm sorry, at the last council meeting, but I will commit to writing the ones that are still outstanding. But I mean, at this point, the clearing has happened, and I'm not sure that there were any questions there that would have impacted us not going ahead with the clearing. Next steps would be coming back to for approval for the next phase, which would be hiring an architect and a construction manager and perhaps a project manager. And we will have to go through an RFP process to do that.
And so you would come to, that would come to council?
After the awarding of the contracts, because of the amount of money that would be required. It's not in anybody's purchasing authority. The clearing was within both the fire chief and the CAO's purchasing authority, so it didn't need any council decision to go ahead. And the public notice was given, and I would just like to remind the public that we have a website or an email address for the fire hall, and if they have any questions, would they please send them to that email address? And then we can address them and put them up in our frequently asked questions list, so that everybody will know what the questions were and get the same answers.
I'll send mine in again.
Process-wise, once we hire an architect or project manager, a schedule will be listed that council approves each step of the way. They will approve the design, they will approve the actual overall cost of the project. So.
Thank you.
Maureen?
Just a question concerning burn guidelines. There was some discussion in social media, and a mention was made of some work that had been done to develop guidelines. And I went looking for them, and I couldn't find them on the website. And former Councillor Printon suggested that you might have some recollection of what happened with the development of burning guidelines. Does this ring a bell?
We have the fire chief here.
Back too, and you might want to come and
But I don't know if
join
you'll
us.
have the answer to
No,
that.
my memory is that burning guidelines are set by Metro Vancouver because of the air quality, and we did have a draft fire services bylaw that never got going, but I don't recall it dealing a lot with burning guidelines because I think they're all set by by Metro Vancouver and air quality, and that's where Ian could answer
Yeah,
that.
but there was specifically what Mr. Frington was talking about, and Andy Baird, who had done the work. That never went any further for an adoption of the bylaw.
Thank you.
Ian, would you have anything to add to that?
No, as Council Moore said, we can follow the air quality index.
Correct.
On 4 burning days, so that's basically our guideline.
Okay.
Municipality doesn't really have one.
Thank you, Ian.
Can I just ask, how does that apply for Saturday and Friday and Saturday? 'Cause
It's 7 days a week they put out the.
was it okay for Friday, because it was awfully smoky?
Yeah, unfortunately, we started it on a burn day.
Yeah.
And how they do it, it's either a multiple burn day or you can start a 1-day burn.
Yeah.
We started on a 1-day burn. We had actually phoned in to find out, can we keep a multiple day burn going? They wouldn't give us a direct answer.
Okay.
But on the link, it did say any multiple day burns going, you could add wood or fuel the next day. So we just followed those
Okay.
guidelines.
So when the day that you started your burn, it said that the following day was, because whenever I phoned it, it tells you whether the next day, you have to have it the following day.
Yeah, you phone every morning at 8:30 and they give you that day's update. So we phoned the next day, it said you could not start any new burns, this was for the Saturday. You
Yeah.
couldn't start any new burns, but any burn that was going on, you couldn't add wood or fuel. But if the fire was still going, we could let it burn. We didn't add any wood or fuel that day.
May I just ask one more thing for clarification, Ian? When I was on Facebook, one of the comments too was the burning of the wood, and just be clear that we've got a timber mark and we're.
Yeah, part of the contract for the company to do it, the price included clearing the lot, or taking the trees down, clearing the lot, and disposing of all the wood. That belongs to them, it's not belong to us anymore. So, and they do have a timber mark that we, municipality took out because it was our land, and they'll be using that to transport the wood.
So this means that the wood will be used, right? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
We're getting money for the good work.
Yes, but
Yeah.
it's not paper, the good wood wasn't paper.
That's what I meant to.
The market for wood will go up. Is everybody okay with that? Obviously, a little bit more communication is required there. Are you okay with that, Sam?
Yeah, that's fine, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. And, okay, so items removed from the consent agenda. And the first one, of course, is 3.2.
We still have an audience.
Yeah,
I wonder
right.
why.
Funny.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Would you like Daniel and I to go over the report?
I don't know if it's necessary. Does anybody really want to see it all?
So we don't.
Has everybody read through it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I pulled it because, oh, just a minute now. I mean, the wrong agenda package. I think the Legion probably has every entitlement to ask that a good neighbor agreement be amended, but I don't think we should be doing the public process. If we were to agree to consider it, I think the motion should be more along the lines that council request staff to consider the Legion request, and that the Legion be required to host a public information meeting with appropriate notice on their proposed good neighbor agreement amendments, and that staff be invited to attend the meeting and report back to council with the neighbors' comments. And that was going to be my original intention. And looking at the good neighbor agreement, I think there's two things that have been highlighted in the staff's report. One is the request to not have a monitor the events or have a Legion person there, and staff is not recommending that. And the other is the which was the other? Oh, the changing the percentage for the noise variation to be canvassed, or be in favor, and I don't think, staff's not in favor of that, because that would mean we'd have different criteria for different areas. So if they're gonna go ahead with the public information process that I believe the Legion should be conducting, then, at their cost, then, if those two things, that staff, if we agree that those two things shouldn't be on the table, then I think it would help the public information process if we took those things off the table now. And then I guess based on the comments today and the, what appears to be lack of support from the neighborhood, and also some confusion as to just what they're asking for, I don't know that we have an actual revised suggested neighborhood agreement. I'm not sure whether we should ask staff to even get involved in this at this point.
So,
I'm going to speak in favor of the recommendations here, because it is 10 years later, and what I, although I can be persuaded, and what I heard from the people in the community who came out to speak in public comments, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I heard support from any of the neighbors. I recall the hard work that went into creating the Good Neighbor Agreement in the first place and the long process there. However, it seems that some things have changed. I heard that there had been new glazing in the front of the building from one of the speakers, and I also heard about axe throwing and drinks being served at the same time, which is a little alarming. So it seems that some of the activities have changed there, and after 10 years and changes in use of the property indoors and, outdoors, and I'm not sure indoors, I think it might be a good opportunity to check in and make sure some of the new neighbors also know about the Good Neighbor Agreement and that kind of thing. So unless staff are going to change their recommendations, I'm in support of the recommendation, seeing as it would only cost us this $750 or whatever was the estimate in the report.
anybody else? Maureen?
I'm in support of the recommendation as written.
Okay.
Well, I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation that we add the words "at the Legion's expense" to the end of it.
Okay.
So they're initiating it, not us.
Yeah, I'm sort of in favor of that. My thought was that, I don't know if it's going to change at all, but I think it could be reviewed. I don't have a problem with it being reviewed. I think there were some items in there, like, I think it's mandatory that they have staff there for any people that rent the place, not through the union, or through the Legion. I think what they have to do is they have to charge that person out as part of the charge for and I don't expect anybody to do it as a volunteer job. I certainly wouldn't do it as a volunteer job, and it should be just charged out. But those are the discussions that should be opened into, and see if there is a little bit room for massaging. But I think, obviously there's some problems with the neighbors, and I can't say, because we only had about 3 of the neighbors here, but I can't say that all the neighbors are in favor or not. So I think there should be a discussion, and I'm happy to move that amendment or the recommendation along as amended by Allison, because I don't think we should be paying for it. It should be their ticket, and I don't think it'd be expensive. Is everybody so?
I have a vision of the Legion as being a part of our community, part of our decentralized kind of community center. It's used by the public, it's booked by the public, It's a volunteer group, and as we all know, Legions across Canada are facing changes in the, anyway, they're all facing challenges, and or most of them, and I wonder how that would work at the Legion's expense. How could we charge them? Would we want to charge a volunteer group for coming before council when so many groups come before council with issues and looking for things, and we don't charge them? I think I would like to move the recommendation as written.
Okay.
A second.
All right. Okay.
Move an amendment
Okay.
to add at the end, and that the Legion be required to pay for the public information meeting, any legal expenses incurred by the municipality, and any direct costs for distribution of notices.
So
Pretty much at the Legion's expense.
So it needs a seconder, and then we vote on the amendment.
Okay, anybody want to second that? Okay. So,
Amendment dies.
amendment
Yeah.
dies.
I guess
Yeah.
just-
Daniel, you had your hand up there.
Oh, it's okay, it was about expenses, but thank you.
Oh.
Yeah,
I can move another amendment if you've got better wording.
well, the only thing I was thinking is that,
You do cost recovery agreements for rezonings and things,
I mean, the Legion can do it, the Legion can do it pretty inexpensively. All they're gonna have is the location, they're gonna get the neighbors in, they're gonna, you know, have an announcement, the neighbors come in, they're gonna have a discussion. And I'd like some staff to be present to see Bonnie probably, to see what comes out of that meeting, and then bring it back to council. Does that sound reasonable? And can somebody put that in recommendation? Or change the recommendation, or should we just?
Just vote on the
Yeah,
recommendation.
the original motion has been moved and seconded. so
Yeah.
we need-
Okay.
So, discussion, how much time is staff gonna, I was there for the last one, and it took a long time and a lot of discussion. And, so, how much time is staff gonna be spending on this first little bit to report back? Attending a meeting and one meeting, and that's all we're approving?
Certainly from reading the report and talking to staff, yes, it's inviting the neighbors. It's a specific invite for neighbors affected by the Good Neighbor Agreement.
And it would be held at the Legion or here, so
I
there's
will
no
turn it over
cost.
to Bonnie and Daniel.
And that's it. So, I mean, I'm just concerned that Bonnie and Daniel are gonna have a stream of 20 and 30 people all wanting to come and meet with them individually over it or whatever. So the process would be come to the public information meeting.
I think that if you read the summary of the report, where it's a communication strategy, staff will invite neighbors as identified in the Good Neighbor Agreement to a neighborhood meeting via letters mailed to property owners and hand-delivered to tenants. An invitation for public comments will be advertised through BIN's dissemination network.
So we're basically anticipating those other pockets for postage in one meeting.
Yeah.
It could go on all day.
Yeah. So the original recommendation is on the table. Is there any more discussion? I'll ask the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. It's
Passed unanimously.
Passed unanimously. And, okay, so the other one was pulled off the agenda was 3.4, Daniel? You and Melanie?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could add something to the recommendation. And reading through the report, I noticed that there was the presence of eelgrass in the vicinity. And I just would like to see that preserved. So I was just wondering if it's possible. What I'd like to do is move an amendment to the recommendation to add the following to the recommendation as written, and that is to add, therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to indicate that Bowen Island Municipality has no objection to the tenure application as long as the mitigation measures as outlined in the environmental impact assessment are implemented and adhered to. So that's my proposal.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Discussion, is that not in the, is that not already in the report, that it would be? Oh,
Yeah, it's just highlighting the fact that the municipality would recommend that it's in.
Okay,
I just would,
I certainly don't have a problem with that.
Can you
I don't think
repeat
it's
the wording?
necessary.
so my adding would be, as long as the mitigation measures as outlined in the environmental impact assessment are implemented and adhered to.
Who's gonna supervise that and ensure that?
I guess the province, that's the province's. It's just highlighting the importance of recommended, it's being recommended.
Maureen?
Just a question for Daniel. Do you see any difficulty in our adding that kind of statement to the recommendation?
No.
No? Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have a problem with that?
Are we looking for a seconder or?
Okay.
I seconded it.
Yeah, I thought it was seconded, yeah. Does anybody have a problem with that? Allison?
I have a question.
Okay.
My question is also about that patch of eelgrass. Our bylaw, our land use bylaw is currently written, says that we don't allow eelgrass beds.
Meadows, I think.
It's meadows.
Meadows?
Yeah.
To be impacted. Do we have a definition for meadow? Okay, thank you. And how, and could, I also don't want this little patch of eelgrass to be lost,
Yeah.
also from the database perspective. So I'm wondering, can we forward this to the, how do we keep this information somehow? That little patch of eelgrass exists. Do we have mapping for those kinds of things, or could we
Islands
forward
Trust
this to the
mapping.
Island May Trust?
Maybe that's a question to ask the Islands Trust actually, is can we send this type of,
So that's maybe a separate motion than following this to Flynn Road, is a separate one to say that we inform Islands Trust of the
Okay.
location ingress.
Has anybody looked at the Islands Trust map to see if this eelgrass exists on that map?
Yeah, in the report, it says that they looked at it, and I didn't double check it myself, but that's what I recall from that part of the map.
But did the
Didn't
map,
double
The
check.
Islands Trust map or the
Islands
map on
Trust.
the environmental study? Okay.
but does it, they,
They're in the environmental report, it states that they checked the Islands Trust GIS mapping of the eelgrass around Bowen Island.
That's,
Map it.
it's one square foot. Yes.
but does their report doesn't say one way or the other whether it was on the Islands Trust map?
It says in the
They checked
report
it, yeah.
that they checked it and there was none noted there in the Islands Trust map it, application and map that
So
they
the
found.
map, the Islands Trust map does not indicate either.
That's what the report says.
There's none on that map yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, can I ask a question? Is all in favor? Good, thank you. Very unanimous.
And I'd like to make a further recommendation that we forward the environmental impact assessment report for this property with the, to the Islands Trust for their consideration in adding to their eelgrass inventory mapping.
I think it's the Islands Trust Fund that did that mapping.
It's on the Islands Trust website, I think, that they'll forward it if they
Yeah.
want to.
Did you get that, Tyler?
Yeah. I got the gist, and I've got the record, both video and audio, so I will make sure it's
Okay.
verbatim.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Maureen? Okay, any discussion? Ask a question, all in favor? Thank you, unanimous.
Thank you.
So I have an ongoing process question that raises.
Okay.
When we're getting all these environmental reports,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the MAP-IT program, both for the terrestrial and the water areas, should we be forwarding those automatically to the Islands Trust MAP-IT people so they can put it on their mapping
I mean, it
or
seems like
flag it?
a good thing in terms of this one, because often we have ones where they show no eelgrass and the dive test shows no eelgrass. And
Yeah.
we don't learn, but it's a valid idea that we've gotten now a number of these throughout the island. It's valuable information. We should be
pass it on.
We can have that conversation at the same time when we send this one.
Awesome. Well, if that's all the business.
Defeat questions in the future too.
True that. Okay, unless anybody's got anything else, that'll be a wrap on the regular council meeting.
We didn't ask if there was any public
Yes.
comment.
Oh, yeah, there's
We have
we already have.
question period.
Question period.
Question period, not public comments, yeah.
To do with today's agenda?
I've got one question.
Sure.
There were a number of colored agendas out. I didn't have, there wasn't one, I could have gotten it online, but there wasn't a yellow one there. Would it be possible, if it's not too much work, we have the screen up.
Yeah.
If you could have the agendas on a PowerPoint so the people, the public can read what you're specifically talking about. Because it was I'm very interested in the Legion issue. I'm a member of the Legion. There's a meeting tonight. I would like to take that back. I would have liked to have followed it a little closer.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the expert
Make a
over
note.
here.
Yeah.
It's not.
Is that possible?
Sure, that can be done.
Yeah, that'd be
It's
great.
a matter of
Numbers
swapping
pass
back and
for you?
forth between presentations and having the agenda up there. Sure, I think that's a great recommendation or suggestion.
Yeah. Allison? Sorry.
Just at sometimes, depending on where we've been in our equipment and how it's working and our internet connection and all that kind of thing, we've been able to have the motion actually up on the screen. And so that as we make any changes and things, that happens on the screen, so we as well can all see it. And that would be great if we can get back to that again, when that's possible.
That will take a little bit more consideration.
Yeah, I think.
Absolutely.
I think having a PDF, a solid document of the agenda,
Yeah.
technically wise, is a no-brainer, but having the on-the-fly,
Yeah.
doing the software where the
There.
minutes are being taken and dealing with that might be just a bit too much.
Well, I'm fine with that too, because we do have it in front of us, and we have the video, and you've got the video and everything, it's all recorded, so it's just a request when you get around to it.
Thank you.
I guess the other thing I was just gonna say from that, there's not usually, the whole agenda package, I don't know if a hard copy is made of that anymore, but if a lot of municipalities and the Islands Trust, there's one binder that has the whole agenda package in it, that's at the back of the room, so if somebody wants to look at it during the meeting and see what is being talked about, they can. But we don't print a whole bunch of paper for people.
It's also online, you
Yes.
can print it off before you can.
That requires forethought.
That required remembering to bring your iPad.
Can I suggest, I support Allison's suggestion that we have at least one full copy of the agenda in a binder somewhere in the room so that the public can look at it, because you don't always look at the other things on the agenda. And I just think it makes it more, so somebody could drop in. I don't want everybody to have to think and plan ahead on their agenda, and if they miss a ferry, they could pop into a council meeting for some fun. Yes, but I think, I do like the idea of having all the info available to people. I don't want to support throwing out tons of paper, but one copy, I think, makes sense to have in a binder, so that other people can also see it in the audience and go, oh, can I have a look at that too?
We used to call them counter copies.
Counter copies. Anyway, do you need a formal motion, or is that
No, I
fine?
don't.
All right. Yeah, sure.
Two comments.
Okay.
One, when I read through the whole package before I came, there was one letter in there from a homeless woman on Island that I'm sure each of you read that just makes me cry, even thinking about it now. So I just hope that that doesn't get lost, because it took a lot for her to do that, and it was very impactful for me personally. Secondly, I had one surprise today, if you can clear it up. It sounded like Sue Ellen, for example, was not aware that the fire hall property was going to be cleared. That shocks me, personally that a counselor wouldn't know something that big of an impact on the community was going to happen. So I'm wondering how that happened, and if it was, is that the way it's supposed to happen?
I think there was notice given, it was public notice given.
Yeah, and a walkabout was given to the councilors that wanted to come to see the area that was going to be cleared.
Okay.
Here, perhaps the council fast can answer that. Yeah, we had a council walkabout, I think it was December 19th, if I'm not mistaken, at the initiative of the mayor. No, it wasn't, it was on the 14th, December. And we asked, the mayor asked for a walkabout to see where, so we could have a sense of what was proposed for the site prep and the clearing. And after, immediately after that, I sent an email out with some questions, and I just never got the answers. And so it was a surprise to me that the clearing was going ahead before I got those answers. So that's why I was asking about the process and going forward from here. And I'm satisfied that staff are going to be involved and that council will be involved in the upcoming steps.
And do it with
Yeah. Thank you.
pleasure. That's in the questions.
Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are we in the open meeting now?
This is an open meeting, this is question period, so you can go ahead and ask your question,
Oh,
Ronnie.
yeah. So Ronnie, this isn't part of the public hearing, right?
This is, or is
This is not.
This is not.
No. We got,
You wanted to speak for the public hearing? I
we'll adjourn this
misunderstood.
meeting and then we've got about 15 minutes. Public hearing starts at 11:30.
Okay.
Okay, so let's adjourn this meeting then and we'll reconvene at 11:30 for the public hearing. Thank you, everybody.